So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Borsa. I'm the Chief Marketing and Data Officer here at Meredith, and I want to welcome all of you to our offices. We are so pleased to host the National 4-H Council today. I grew up in a small town in Canada, and 4-H was actually an integral part of the community. And there's also some commonality. Our organizations have a really, really long history together. So our founder, E.T. Meredith, was instrumental in setting up the National 4-H Council. He contributed both financially and actually set up a feature section in Successful Farming, which is a publication that still exists today. And that feature section highlighted the innovative work of this organization and the participants in this organization. And the Meredith Foundation and the Meredith family continues to support the 4-H at both the state and national levels. We were really honored last year to be given a Corporate Partner Award in Des Moines. And then, obviously, Meredith's changed since the 1900s. We've come a long way. We've got a lot of big things happening. But at our heart, we focus on reaching women, 110 million women across platforms. And we're really about reaching and engaging and inspiring her and her families and the women that are bringing up the children, of tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow. And so, we are so pleased to be working together to help the 4-H sort of further their cause as you reach and engage the youth of America. So happy to have you here. Without further ado, let's get this started. So I want to introduce Jennifer Sarangelo, the President and CEO of the National 4-H Council.
So much. Thank you. Well, Alicia, thank you so much to you and your team here at Meredith for really being such gracious hosts for us today and for this Ideas Forum. I really want to especially thank Nancy, Maria, Jordan. Are you guys in the room? That we can say thank you guys so much for all you've done to help us make today possible. So I can't think of a better venue for today's discussion where we want to talk about the trends shaping our world, and better than a place like this, the home of this media and marketing powerhouse at Meredith. You really do deliver content and products that are leading the way with consumers and their families, and so we're really excited to be here in your home today. And as Alicia mentioned, we do share a founder in Edwin T. Meredith, who in 1921 became the first chairman of the board of the predecessor organization to today's National 4-H Council when he convened in New York. And the group with Mr. Penny and others. So it's a pretty amazing history that we share together. So we're really honored that you've welcomed us here. So I'm also pleased that a number of the members of our Board of Trustees that now follow in his footsteps are here to join us. And I wanted to see, first of all, is our Vice Chair, is Jen Whitlow here? Is she here? I wanted to recognize her. Okay. But if any of you are a member of our Board of Trustees, could you just raise your hand? We're so grateful that you're here. We've got a number of our trustees. Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge our state 4-H leader here in New York. We're really excited to be in New York City for our board meeting and our board events this week. And I'm very happy to acknowledge Dr. Andy Turner, who's the state 4-H leader with Cooperative Extension at Cornell. And he's here with us today, too. And just like all good New Yorkers, he not only is a leader here, but he's a national leader, too. So I'm really thankful for him. Let's see, I also wanted to recognize we have some alumni in the room. So I know we have a few of our 4-H luminaries who we recognized last spring and others. So if you're a 4-H alum, could you raise your hand if you've been in 4-H? All right, welcome. Well, we're glad we have our alums in the room too. Great. So I don't want to take up too much of your time this morning because I want to get moving on the meat of our program. But I just wanted to share a little bit of context for how today's discussion connects to the work of 4-H. So you see, everything we do in 4-H is about our belief in the power of young people and their ability to drive change. Yes, in the future, but also today. And I think people in this room understand that youth are influencing everything from culture to media to public opinion to politics. And we know that it's critical for us to reach even more of them. Today, there's about 35 million of America's 58 million kids that are not a part of one of our national youth development organizations or are not involved in a positive youth development organization. So we know it's really critical for us to really garner and gather that enthusiasm now and to help them tackle the real world problems that we see in our families and our communities. For me, sometimes that's the only hope I have. So I love being a part of a youth development organization where we can make that happen. So I wanted to just take a moment to let you know how honored we are at National 4-H Council to really have the opportunity at the national level to tell the story of what 4-H and cooperative extension are doing at the local level. To me, what really matters is the 4-H volunteers, 4-H parents, 4-H families in 3,100 counties around the country who today, there's probably, we think on average, about 5,000 4-H clubs are meeting today somewhere in America, and those kids are learning leadership skills, they're learning life skills, they're learning to get along with people different than them, and they're learning how they can make an impact on their community. So I'm really, really thankful for you all being here. This is the second in our series of ideas forums. And our first one we did in Silicon Valley with our alumni at Facebook and Google and Vivo, and a couple of you that were there with us had a chance to be a part of that, where we talked about innovation and how technology can help drive the future of how we engage with young people. So we're really excited to be here today to think about media and marketing and how young people can help drive the future through this second of our ideas forums. So I'm very lucky that today we have engaged a marketing powerhouse to help facilitate today's discussion. So Allison Lewis's impressive career includes 18 years of marketing trailblazing at Coca-Cola and their various brands, my favorite, Diet Coke. I'm not going to be shy about that. Before she was engaged to revamp the marketing mission at Johnson & Johnson. So she was recently recognized with the Advertising Women of New York's Woman of the Year Award. But I'm mostly honored to know her as, and introduce her as one of our, at National 4-H Council, one of our most trusted advisors, our past board chair, and a fierce champion of young people here in America and around the world. So please join me in welcoming our MC for today's panel, Allison Lewis, Global Chief Marketing Officer of Johnson & Johnson.
Jennifer, yes, I think I'm allowed to have that one. All right, so thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you to all of you attending. And once again, thank you to Meredith and everyone in the room that's from Meredith and hosting this for us. Meredith is a big partner of Johnson & Johnson, and actually there was news on Monday that Meredith is acquiring Time Inc., so they're going to become even more of a powerhouse and even more important to Johnson & Johnson. So important to 4-H and important to Johnson & Johnson. We appreciate that. We are going to get started here, and I'll tell you a little bit, about me and my connection to 4-H. So as Jennifer mentioned, I've sat on the 4-H board for about 7 years, and I got connected to 4-H through Coca-Cola. And it's really an honor to engage with the largest youth organization in the United States, which actually has an impact throughout the world. But in terms of what we do, really serving kids that are future leaders, future innovators, and that's going to drive our country forward. And important to me personally, because I need to understand the youth of today in order to be able to, work with them in the future and drive my business forward in the future. What I see at 4-H is, quite frankly, youth that find their voice and find themselves. And as a mother of 3 boys and exposed to children almost every single day, I can't tell you how important that is, particularly in those teen years when things can get a little bit rocky. So what I've seen at 4-H is the power of a kid finding a passion, the power of an immigrant to the United States figuring out how he or she is going to be a leader in this community. Someone who comes to 4-H and becomes a first-generation college graduate. Someone who is so shy that he is timid and terrified and shaking to stand up in front of a group like this, and all of a sudden, after a year in 4-H, is standing up and speaking like I am. I mean, this is impressive stuff. These are kids that find themselves and therefore make a difference in the future. And that matters, to Jennifer's point, in terms of making a difference in our world. I'm thrilled today to be obviously the MC of this forum, and this luncheon is really more than sort of networking over a meal. It's really about sparking conversation, collaboration, a place where we can sort of gather together and learn and have meaningful dialogues about the top trends, about insights, ideas, things that shape the world today from a youth perspective. So today's discussion, we're really going to harness youth voice and influencer and how that impacts the larger consumer marketplace, how it provides opportunities to really hear from a variety of the changes and perspectives that are impacting our communities around the world. So I am going to jump right in and invite our panelists to come up, and I'll introduce each of them. I'll actually sit. What we're going to do here is I will introduce our panelists. We'll also have time for your questions. And what I'd love in your questions is not just questions, but any point of view you have, because we have a number of very interesting people in the room that can also provide context to what we hear from our panelists today. And then we'll have an exciting presentation on a sneak preview of 4-H's 2018 brand campaign, including the 6 million youth that we serve around the United States. So to begin, I'd like to actually introduce our panel, and I'll start with the gentleman to my left, who is Connor Blakely, who is 1 year older than my oldest son, which makes me look at my son and say, my gosh, you better get your act together. So he is the 18-year-old CEO and founder of Youth Logic. Connor founded Youth Logic to help brands and companies better connect with Gen Z and create lifelong brand loyal consumers. He works alongside North America Gen Y and Gen Z consultancy called Intercept Group that supports brands such as Microsoft, 3M, 7-Eleven, Unilever, Toyota, and L'Oreal. And I think we even did some work when I was at Coca-Cola. I do recall that Youth Logic was a partner that we worked with. And previously, Connor ran a social media consultancy that he grew to more than 50 clients in North America. So a very esteemed panelist at the young age of 18 years old. Puts all of us to shame, I will say. Next up is Jeff Edwards, who is co-head creative CAA marketing, and I've done work with CAA marketing, so it's nice to meet another senior member of the CAA marketing team. So he provides creative solutions for a list of Fortune 500 companies by leveraging the power of entertainment to build brands and to drive growth. He was co-founded Saturday Morning, which is a coalition for peace with big industry heavyweights, Keith Cartwright, Jamare, sorry, I'm going to get the name wrong, Gianta Jenkins, and then Jimmy Smith. Jeff is a custodian of the CAA belief, if we take care of each other, good things will happen. Well, what could be more true than that? So thank you, Jeff, for joining us today. And next up, we have Katie Townsley, and Katie is Vice President and Executive Director of Social at Meredith, Accelerated Marketing, or MXM, because everything today has to have an acronym, just to confuse us. But she is a member of the MXM leadership team. Remember, that's Meredith Accelerated Marketing, and MXM's lead for social. Katie partnered with her Effie, Mashy, Polly, Shorty, and everything else with an IE on the end, right? Award-winning team to develop hundreds of social campaigns and digital experiences. She's been fortunate to witness many exciting channel and platform firsts, powered by smart creative content and innovations in digital and technology. And then last but not least, Lazarus Lynch, who I have known for many years, I think from my first days at 4-H. But he is a 4-H alum. He's a Food Network host and chef. And Lazarus hosts the Food Network's digital original series Comfort Nation, and the face behind the popular brand, Son of a Southern Chef. He was New York City born and raised. He stepped into the kitchen at an early age under the tutelage of his late father, Johnny Ray Lynch, who is an amazing man, a chef from Bessemer, Alabama. And together, they created a special bond in the kitchen that would soon launch into a successful media enterprise. So Lazarus has been featured on many national television shows for his expertise in millennial cooking and modernized social food cuisine. So thank you, Lazarus, for being here. And thank you to all our panelists. So with that, I think we'll jump right in. And as you know, the title of our discussion is The In Crowd of Gen Z as Influencers, Innovators, and Investors. And I'd like to set the stage first with some really interesting insights from Harris about the post-millennial generation. So first of all, they matter to brands. So by 2020, Gen Z, who first I think were born 1995 all the way up to 2014, will account for about 40% of all customers, so the people that we work with every day. They're connected and decentralized, so this will be the first generation that never knew a world without social media, and we've got Facebook friends here, so thank you, Tawana, or Google, and Celia's over there from Google, so thank you for being, and Google is actually a partner of 4-H, so thank you for your partnership. They're hardwired for innovation and invention. They are on a mission not only to be entrepreneurs, but also the inventors who change the world, with 72% of college students saying that they want to start their own businesses, and 40% of Gen Z college students planning to invent something that will change the world. So these Gen Z are inventors, innovative, they're connected, and brands matter to them. What could be better than that? And with that, we'll engage in the dialogue. So let's hear from everyone sort of with the first question, and I think it relates to a headline. So if we think of sort of that newspaper headline, what is that newspaper headline that you would use to describe this dynamic group of tomorrow's consumers and future leaders, and why? So I guess I'll go in order here, and I'll start with Connor here.
Well, once again, thank you guys so much for having me. Blessed to be here. It's an honor to be here, and it's an amazing organization, and love a lot of the things you guys are doing. If I could come up with a newspaper headline to describe Generation Z, it would be "We're here now." A lot of times, sometimes when I talk to brands, they often say, who's Gen Z? What's Gen Z? And I honestly think it's a crime, because a lot of people are still classifying us as millennials, and we're vastly different in a plethora of different ways. So, and also in order to better connect with and resonate with all generations, it's essential to create a youthful brand. So if you don't really understand today's youngest consumers that are really, in my opinion, driving culture and a lot of things that are happening in the world and in this country, you're not going to be able to do what you want to do.
Love it. So we're here now. Jeff.
Same. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. This is an important conversation about the future youth leaders, and so, in addition to being on the panel with these acclaimed panelists, I'm also looking forward to sharing with you work a little bit later. It's funny, as you were asking the question, I was thinking, okay, well, it wouldn't be a newspaper headline because they don't touch paper.
Showing my
age. It would be, okay, so let's try this again. It would be a blog, it would be an update, it would be a Snapchat filter, it would be something that would come in through the door of entertainment, which is, at CA Marketing, there's not a week that goes by that this conversation is an irrelevant one. Just as you thought you figured out kind of like Generation X, you have Gen Z. So it's like, I like to call it the moving target. because the reality is there's no way to hit them. The minute you think you kind of have a beat on them, something changes. They come in through the door of entertainment. And they are very, very well and savvy of marketing. So whether it's Stranger Things, content series, scripted series, whether it's an album or by chance a rapper or some sort of a communication of that type, that's the world that they live in, and that's the way they communicate.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally thought
Katie.
the same thing. It's so fun to be here as part of Meredith. We've always loved being a part of 4-H, so it's really fun to be a little bit a part of that. I've been with Meredith for a really long time, so this is just another checkbox for me off my Meredith bucket list to hang out with 4-H. I was thinking the same thing too. It wouldn't be in a headline. I was also trying to think what emoji they would use
Yes.
because visual language is just so important. But I think it would also be hear me now. This audience wants to be included in the conversation. It's not push messaging anymore. For those of us that work with brands, your brand is also what your consumers say your brand is right now. So incorporating their voice and their content into and making it a part of your brand story, I think is really important, especially to connect with this generation.
Everything they just said.
Everything they just
You're
said.
the brilliant ones. Thank you also. I'm truly honored to be here today and to talk with these acclaimed panelists as well, and also to lend some of my 4-H experience and background to the conversation. So thank you for having us. Well, if I will pull on the African of my American, I will answer the question. I do not understand this generation. I cannot understand it. This generation, I live with one. My sister is a part of the Gen Z generation, and I don't understand them. But what I will say is, I probably think of it as a GIF, right? As a GIF, GIF. It would be some sort of moving image of a bunch of young people showing up at different places. And maybe they're showing up with a billboard. Maybe they're showing up, in a T-shirt that all says the same thing. Maybe they're showing up with their faces painted the same color to talk about something. So if I were to give it a headline to appease that part of the audience who's in the room today, I would say, you may take away our cell phones, but you can never take away our voice. And I think that's really the heart of this Gen Z generation. They show up, they're present, they're engaged, they are a part of the conversation, they are changing the narrative, changing the culture. And that is Gen Z. We show up, they show up. I've cut off. I was born 94, so I'm like barely.
You're a little younger.
You guys remember 94? I just made it here. So it's interesting. I'm going to save my comments for the rest of the panel.
Outstanding.
Yeah. Thank you.
Outstanding. Okay, so you started to get some insight into, how this Gen Z thinks. And I guess, Connor, I'll start with you in that Damon John of Shark Tank and branding pioneer describes you as someone who understands the influence of trends on consumer behavior and the power of Gen Z. That's quite a anointment. But the question for you is really, what can you share with us about this generation of innovators and disruptors, and why major brands need to pay attention?
So really love what I might butcher your name, Lazarus. Lazarus. Really love what Lazarus had to say about we show up. We really do show up. And I think it's because a couple different reasons. The first one being we're the first generation that can FaceTime our friends, order a pizza, and text our mom all at the same time. So our access to information and technology really gives us the power and the visibility and the connectivity to kind of go out there and own our own movements. When we were talking about branding and how we want to be included in, I forget exactly what you said, but I'm going to try to articulate it correctly. What can you just say it again? I kind of forget. No. Yeah. The branding voices, how our brands are a part of it.
They want to be a part of the brand's voice.
Exactly.
You are what your consumer says you are.
The story part, though.
The story.
Yes, the story. So the fact that we have so much access to information and technology, it really gives us the ability to engage with brands in a way that we deem meaningful. I think the second way is in 2008, 2009, the recession hit the United States, and we saw our houses our friends' houses being foreclosed upon, our own houses being foreclosed. We weren't able to go out to eat with our friends as much, and in our adolescence, this was a super impressionable time in our lives. I truly, so our access with information and technology combined with our worldview, so we've seen what happens if you put your future in someone else's hands. This has to do with entrepreneurship as well. It's like a lot of people say millennials were the first truly entrepreneurial generation. No bias, but I really think it's Generation Z because we've kind of, excuse my language, but eat shit in a lot of different ways. So that combined with our access to information and technology really makes for something truly powerful.
Outstanding. So Jeff, you have a number of accolades in the industry. A few of them are you've been featured on the cover of Creativity Magazine's inaugural Creativity 50, which must mean you're really creative. So I love that. And then Boards Magazine Top 50 Art Directors, which also means you're pretty esteemed in the industry because I know this industry pretty well. And you've designed sort of award-winning campaigns for Adidas, Microsoft, Xbox 360, and I think the question I want to ask you is sort of the intersection of brands and entertainment and music is something you work with every day. But the question that I think this audience might be interested in is what has the greatest influence on the other? So do Gen Zers influence sort of the entertainment and music industry, or does the entertainment and music industry sort of influence Gen Zers?
That's an excellent question. I would have to say I don't see them as, or actually I see them as, don't see them as mutually exclusive. And when I say that, I mean, okay, let me just, Monday morning in our office, what we typically have is something called marketing staff. And at marketing staff, we sit and with our colleagues, and we go over all the trends that are happening around the world. And the people who are influencing those trends. And in many cases, we're talking about, you know, Gen Z. So you know, when I think about your question, I think about people like Logan Paul, and I think about how, you know, he comes through the door of like kind of like blogging about himself and telling his story online, and now he's leaning toward Hollywood features. I think about Zendaya, who starts off as a singer. And on the Disney Channel, and so she comes in through that door, and then it's kind of like catapulted her career into now motion picture, and honestly, the world is her oyster. She's amazing. And you know, the list just goes on and on of those types of people. Chance the Rapper, the list goes on of influencers that are able to kind of like blur the lines between music and entertainment and sports and so on. Everything is everything for this generation. For my own personal work, I've focused a lot of the work that I've done that you mentioned earlier on the youth target market. I love it because I find it the most challenging, and in the most challenging, the way that you tell the stories that you mentioned have to be incredibly clever. Because they're a consumer of mass media, but they're also very, very aware of the media that they are being consumed. I'll tell you a quick story, then I promise I'll pass on. A month ago, I was on a panel in Beverly Hills for Variety magazine, and the woman sitting to my left was the head of Barbie. And so the same way, like you're sitting on a panel just like this, you're fans of the panelist. She's a fan of my work, and I'm thinking, you're Barbie. You know, and not just the Barbie that maybe you know, my mom had or that my daughter had, but you're the modern day Barbie where you gave her curves, where you gave her ethnicity, where you gave her lips, where you gave her hair curls. And so when we think about marketing and we think about, you know, the job that marketing does, that is the greatest marketing thing ever because it's in your hand every single day, and it is the first impression you have of in some cases your sexuality, in some cases the way you see yourself as a person, and the way that you identify with the world.
And if you're not connecting with that in the right way, right?
Then it's destructive.
It's, yeah, absolutely destructive. Very, very destructive. So, Katie, let's talk a little bit about voice that youth use through social media or leverage social media to drive their voice. And that's something that you're an expert on, having won every E award there possibly is to win. But I think the question is really around the power of voice and the role that social media plays in that. And then maybe just an example of who you think is doing it well. Who's sort of leveraging social media for voice, whether it's a brand or an individual, it doesn't matter. But the point is, how are you leveraging sort of voice well in that space?
Yeah, no, I think back to, I think what we've all said is that this audience wants to be a part of the conversation. So I think that if you're inviting someone to be a part of the conversation, you need to use the same language, the same vernacular. You have to sort of have the same experience, the same anecdotes. And you want to do it in a way that I think in the past we had sort of seen youth and condescended to them or talked at them or talked down to them. And with this generation, because they're so connected, because of their phone, because of social, you really are going to be called out. You've no quarter to do that anymore because they are so empowered in a great way to speak up and to speak out. And I think that goes from everything you're seeing in their schools when they talk about bullies. They say, don't be a bystander, be an upstander. For those of you that have kids, I know you guys probably talk about that in 4-H too. It's so important. And so this generation is going to upstand in every possible medium that they have. And so I think that if you're going to connect with them, you have to understand that that's how they're talking. And so I think, we've been a part of campaigns like the work that we did with The Real Cost, which was an anti-tobacco campaign, a tobacco cessation campaign. And it's not the sexiest. It's not Zendaya. It's not, Hulu, Stranger Things, or anything like that. The work that some of this stuff that people are doing really great work. But it was about how do we get teens to stop smoking or to talk about not wanting to smoke when only 1 in 10 of them really do smoke. There's been a lot of great work. And one of the things that we found is we used their anecdotes. We actually asked them for their own stories. We talked to them on the platforms in the way that they did. Sometimes some of our posts were just visual images. They want things to be real. So we actually showed, when we called it The Real Cost, we showed yellow teeth. We talked about things that are important to them in the minute. I think that, previous campaigns had shown, like the older guy with the trach. Yeah. If you're 14 years old, you're not thinking about that. Your life is the next period of school, right? Your life is not 50 years ago. So what we talked to them about is that you're going to smell bad. You're going to miss practice. You're going to need to use your inhaler. Maybe a girl's not going to want to kiss you. A guy's not going to want to stand around you. The cigarette is a bully. You're going to miss out on something really important in your life. And yeah, the fear of missing out, exactly. So I think that those insights are as important as the tonality and the voice that you use to really be genuinely connected. So no matter if you're talking about something as fun as Stranger Things, or if you're talking about finance, better money habits, which these kids care about, and helping their friends to stop smoking, if you talk to them in that way, that's really going to be connected, and you don't this concept that you have to talk at them, I think, has gone away, and I think all the platforms that they use show that as well, and they're going to create content with you. So I think the other way to be really accepting of that voice is to use their content, and I'm not talking about just user-generated content. Okay, I'm talking about actually making their content and their voice a part of your brand, using the filters, whatever digital experience that you're making it interactive and personal, so that's a part of their voice in your brand campaign too, the content that they make and their real life experience. And so I think that brands that really do that and embrace that are the ones that are going to be really successful moving forward.
Great. Connor, you're going to ask.
So I love all of this dialogue about like a lot of the cool campaigns that we've created and come up with, and really try to target young people and make them feel empowered. And I feel like I was making this mistake for a long time is, you know what, we're going to make young people feel empowered, and then they're going to share our stuff, and then we're going to get a ton of impressions, and we're going to love it. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that, and it's actually something I just discovered, and it's making them feel fulfilled. Because I think feeling empowered and feeling fulfilled are two different things. I'm not going to say my girlfriend's friend's name because she doesn't want me to anymore, but when she takes a selfie and puts it on Instagram, it takes her 10 minutes to find the right angle. Then it takes her 5 minutes to get the right lighting. And then it takes her 5 minutes to like get the courage to click the button. And then it takes 5 minutes to swipe it and filter it correctly. And then it takes 10 minutes to post it. And I remember a story a couple weeks ago. Like I know this because my girlfriend's in a group chat with all of her friends, and she sent it to me, and she posted a picture, and she's like, 150 likes, WTF. LOL, what? She's like, should I take it down and repost later? So the amount of likes that we're getting, and I find myself being guilty of this too. I'm like, shit, I only got 800 likes. Like, why didn't I get like 2,000? I've got a lot of followers. You know what I mean? So our likes in our, like, the new social currency we're living in is social media. Now, that can be a really powerful thing, and that can be a really detrimental thing. It depends on brand responsibility and the morals and how they do that. So I think it's a horrible thing, but it's also an opportunity. And I think with every travesty comes a very vague and beautiful opportunity. So I just wanted to add that in.
No, that's absolutely fantastic context. Now, Lazarus, I want to ask you a little question about, you're someone who we just learned is part of actually the millennial generation by 1 year.
A year.
But you're also an influencer, yeah, who's developed an authentic and unique brand in the culinary world that really connects with a new generation of food enthusiasts, which is very exciting. So how do you think your generation is really shaping the culinary industry now, and what impact do you think it will have in the future?
Well, it's interesting. I started out cooking in my kitchen with my dad. My dad owned a restaurant in New York City, Queens, New York, where we live. And my idea of cooking was spending time with my dad and spending time in the kitchen. So went on to culinary school, went to a great high school, which some of you may get to see today, called Food and Finance. Went there, learned how to cook. My idea of being a chef was, I want to work in a restaurant. That's what I want to do. I want to be behind a stove. I want to serve people. I don't want to deal with anyone. I just want to do the food, cook the food. That was my idea of being a chef. Went on to college and started writing. Just started writing about food, sharing it on campus, created a YouTube series called My College Kitchen. Now, I didn't really expect anybody to really watch it. I just thought, I was going to do this series because it was something I wanted to do. I had a lot of fun. I basically recruited people on campus to hold a camera for me and to, hold up a light, and then I'll feed you at the end of it. That was sort of my pitch. It worked.
Free food for college kids.
Worked.
It always works.
It worked. And it was simple things like scrambling eggs. How many of you know how to scramble eggs by show of hands? Okay, I think all of you are lying. I think to properly scramble an egg,
Maybe they're not good.
You need Julia Child, you need all of the greatest chefs to show you, you need 4 years of culinary school, and maybe you'll learn how to crack an egg. It's like taking something that's so simplistic, like scrambling an egg, making that interesting, talking about the science. I think that's why, like, millennials and Gen Z love Alton Brown, for example. Food Network people are here in the room. Hi, I get to work with Food Network. So excited about that. But Alton Brown has been such an incredible voice for kids because they're like, wow, that's so cool. When you put something in the pan, that's actually what's happening. So I've been able to sort of take the conversation and say, okay, here's how we scramble an egg. Now, what can you do with this egg? Not only can you scramble it, you can make an omelet out of it. You can flip it. You can make a sauce. You can make a hollandaise. You can make a salad dressing with one ingredient. And that blew the minds of a lot of kids on my campus. So suddenly I started seeing all these impressions and follows and all these other kinds of things, and then had an opportunity to go work with ABC and work with other networks, and now with the Food Network. And I think one of the greatest shows that we've done together so far is Comfort Nation. And what that's allowing me to do is to go into restaurants, like everyday mom and pop restaurants, just like the kind my mom and dad owned, and tell the stories about real people cooking real food with real cultural significance. So I think the trend that's happened inside of the culinary space is like, okay, what's the next big thing, right? We did the large cake, the lava cake. Okay, now we're gonna do the spaghetti donut. Now we're gonna do the rainbow bagel. It's like all that stuff. But what about the culture? Where is the culture being preserved? Where are those traditions? So I get to sort of be a voice of, I understand where you're coming from. I understand the importance of a filter. I put one up this morning. If you follow me on Instagram, you can see it. I understand the significance of that, but I also understand like how to roast a chicken. Those are the simple skills that will carry you throughout the kitchen, throughout your life. So a lot of what I see is when Gen Zers follow me on Instagram, it's always so funny. I automatically click on their profiles. I look at their bio. A lot of them have private accounts, so you can't see any of their feeds. You have to follow them. You have to make the request, and then this is important, you have to make the request, and then they have to decide whether they want to allow you to follow them or not. Okay, that's power. That's power, controlling, being the gatekeeper of your own content. So I have to do that. But all I see inside of, I tell you, like 90% of their bios, so the bio is something that you put right under your name, tell people who you are, what you do, So What it says is AMOSC. Who knows what that means? Add me on Snapchat. 90%. 90%. AMOC colon, and then they write their Snapchat name. Now I see a lot of you just like, what am I talking about? Let me break it down. So this is important, and I'm going to explain why it's important. They're inviting you into that space. You have to make the request. That's number one. Number two, they're telling you where else you can find them. If you want more of their content, if you want to be able to be a part of their lives and be a part of this community, you have to physically go and put in their code into a Snapchat, and their profile will come up. Then you have to follow it. Then you can be a part of their community. So there's a lot of boundaries to entrance here, right, into that generation. You have to be able to navigate through those boundaries. What's different about 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, and I was talking about this with someone in the room, YouTube has given us it's created the culture of skip ad, right? So if I don't want to see an ad, I can skip it. Television, you don't have that power. You have to endure an ad, or you have to fast forward through it. Right now we have the technology where you can fast forward through it. Why is that important? So we have to now, as we're thinking about how do we attract this very inclusive, very diverse, always changing, can't stay on top, they're doing 4 things at once. How do we stay on top of that? Well, you have to understand what the boundaries of entrance are, barriers of entry. Then you also have to understand the language. You have to understand how to navigate through that. And then you also have to understand that if you want them to click on something that you find important or that's going to help your business, it has to be through the lens that they present it. It has to be in their voice. It has to be their voice, not just in their voice, because I can act and just create a voice, but it has to be their voice. So I think, when I think about the culinary world, it's huge. It's changing all the time. I can follow a chef in Spain, one of the greatest chefs on the planet, and know what he's doing in his 5-star Michelin restaurant because I follow him on Instagram. I know what someone's doing in Paris, this bread maker, right? Because I look at their stories on Instagram. So it's now this relationship between chef and eater, consumer, diner, and chef. It's becoming sort of more and more mutual, more and more intimate. And I think that's what's happening today.
Outstanding, and that's actually great for. Did you want to add something there? Yeah,
then
I'll go to my last question. Yeah.
I think all the conversation is typically when I'm talking with brands, it's about digital, and I think that's actually kind of a problem too, because I talk a lot about my sisters. I have one of my sisters is 16 years old. She's a junior in high school. A lot smarter than me. Scholarship for soccer. She's a beast. So when she tweets a brand, now it's no longer cool to get a tweet back. It's expected. 2 years ago, if you tweeted a brand and they tweeted you back, it was like, oh my God, Taco Bell tweeted me back, and then you'd retweet it, and then you'd probably go tell your friends because it was awesome. But now it's expected. It's become commoditized. But if my dad gets something in the mail, he just rips it up and throws it away. He's like, I don't need this. But when my sister gets something in the mail with her name on it, she flips out. Now she's getting letters for colleges and stuff, but before that, even if it's not a college letter now, she goes, I got something in the mail. What is it? So one of the campaigns we're running with one of our clients is we're literally hiring 4 high school interns, giving them stacks of paper this high from the ground, and then we're combining digital and traditional. So we're having them go through, for instance, PepsiCo. We're having the interns go to PepsiCo, see who follows PepsiCo. We're having the interns write, hey, my name's Kaylee. I'm a 17-year-old intern at PepsiCo. Really love the picture you posted of the Brooklyn Bridge. Let us know how we can better service you. From Kaylee, boom, send it in the mail. Cynthia from Queens, New York gets it in the mail. Oh, my God. Someone at PepsiCo wrote me a handle. And then guess where they post it? Social media. So as much as we're
back around.
Yeah, but everyone does traditional wrong. TV, you notice all the kids and all the parents are watching Super Bowl ads. Why? Because it's the first time they're seeing interesting content in a hell of a long time from anybody. So if people were making those kinds of commercials all the time, nobody would care. Nobody would care to have to sit through ads because it doesn't feel like ads. It feels like they're watching a YouTube video that they would have wanted to watch anyway. So if you do things the right way, then it doesn't matter where the hell you put it. It just matters if people are going to think it's interesting and watch it.
Beautiful, because you guys actually just teed off the last question, which is, who is connecting to these Gen Z consumers well, and what advice do you have? And I think I'll start with actually Jeff, and then we'll jump to Katie, and then if you guys have any closing words, Connor and Lazarus.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. God, I don't know anybody just top of mind that I would think is killing it. I think in some cases it's going to come from, and maybe this because this is where I sit every day at the kind of like the epicenter of entertainment. It's entertainers, it's people that acknowledge the fact that everything that we've mentioned up on this panel so far, that these young, these smart individuals are also publishers, and so each person, as you can see the behavior happen when someone's out. Are they enjoying themselves, or are they publishing the event so that they can kind of put it out and then get their community's take on whether or not what they did was good? The films that are being done, the content series that are coming through our building day in and day out, the artists that are coming in through our building day in and day out. The best stories that are being told now are not so much from, pardon the expression, but the silver hair executives that are kind of being phased out, but by the young content makers like the Issa Raes and the list goes on that are developing content where they put these children right at the center of it. They're the protagonist. And so as it's relevant to the conversation with 4-H, it's interesting because when we're able to see these young influencers at the center of these of storytelling, great things happen. So without being specific, I'd have to say just generally, the consumption is what you mentioned earlier. It's the things that people enjoy. It's the outdoor concerts. It's the movies. It's the scripted content. It's comedy. It's all of those types of things that this consumer base is really connecting with. And the people that are doing it well are doing it seamlessly. They're doing it in ways that don't feel heavy-handed. They're doing it in ways that involve them, and frankly, they're winning.
And then it's the piece of mail that then becomes part of the content that gets created. I mean, I think it's fascinating that the pendulum is swinging, yet technology is still being used to drive that every day. Katie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I everything that you just said, because I think it goes back to that authenticity, that real true self, and it's not produced. I think the brands that are winning now are those that tell a little bit about themselves too, the brand promise, what you actually stand for, what you're doing with your profit outside of just giving it to your shareholders and yelling profit, right? I think that that's really important because I think that these Gen Zers have all of this information and they can look you up. Yep. They can actually comparison shop right there on their phone while they're standing in the store. We've seen them do that if I'm going to get this same product. And so they really want to know. They'll spend a little bit more also if they know where their money is going. So I think about, companies that really have great social good campaigns or good for you, good for the planet campaigns. I think that's why Patagonia has been really successful internationally, not just here in the US, but I mean, just overall, even with young people, even if you can't afford it right now, that kind of aspirational, my daughter as a young person, as a Gen Zer, she knows who that is. She's never bought one. She can't afford it. But that's what she's going to do when she gets her money because she knows where it's going.
She knows the story.
And so I think that that's also something that every brand kind of needs to acknowledge and accept. And I think that it can't be a stunt. I think it has to be woven into your mission statement. I think that you have to live it outside. It's not something that can be a campaign. And so I think that organizations where it's true to their ideals and their principles and they talk about it every day and then they align themselves with influencers that talk about the same thing every day. You can't just call up, Zendaya unless she's talked to you about fashion and she's talked to you about sustainable things and she's talked to you about that's who she wants to be with too. So I think that that's another component to this type of Gen Z consumer, and because they're not really consumers, they're like world participants. I think that's kind of how I think about them now. They're world leaders, and it's less about the consuming for them. I think
much more about creating and purpose and storytelling and all of that and giving back and being here now, right, Connor? We're here now. That was his newspaper headline. Connor did a newspaper headline. See, because he realizes that actually paper is back.
So super naively, I got in Cleveland Plain Dealer. It's like Northeast Ohio newspaper. I live in Cleveland, and I got on the front page of the business section. I was like, oh, this is gonna be cool. My parents are gonna see it because I'm gonna show them. Nobody's really gonna see it, and like I got hit up by tons of people. Like this whole notion that traditional media is dead. It's total BS. Like I had my friends' moms being like, "Oh my God, I saw you in the paper." I'm like, "Wait, people still read that?" like it's absolutely wild to me. And then I sit on the airplane, and then I see everyone open up the newspaper, and they're not going on their phone. I'm like, this is crazy. I don't see this happening often. So, and by the way, I loved what you said about Patagonia because they're absolutely. I always say, yeah, no one's killing it. Like everyone just has these one hit wonders, like Wendy's, super one hit wonder, like chicken nuggets and like a kid. Come on, they got so lucky that's not even they're not even that cool of a brand. But is Wendy's doing anything cool now? No, they're back to the same old dumb stuff. But Patagonia is the same one that's consistently killed it the entire way through. All my friends love Patagonia. Even kids who can't afford Patagonia are saving up to buy it. It's woven into their brand message. If you go to Patagonia.com, then you see they had something, Trump took our land or something like that. So they're very they took a massive stand. So it's powerful.
So listen, we're getting a bit of the wrap. We got to keep this show on time, and we want to move to a few questions from the audience. So I'm going to open it up to all of you, and I'll let everyone can sort of answer these questions. This is an interactive session, or if you have a point of view on what's been said, because I think there's some really, really interesting sort of divergent thoughts here that are making me think too in terms of how do we connect with these consumers of tomorrow. Is there a mic that?
I can speak loudly enough. Small room, right? Hi, everybody. Hi. I got a random question. An interesting panel to take it. I've been dying for someone to call me up and say, "How would you rebrand MTV?" Which I think we've seen. I heard a great line from somebody once. They said MTV was the grungy guy in the back of the classroom, pot smoking, etc., and now they're a skinny cheerleader. And it's an interesting progression. I think their brand relevance has kind of been waning for years. What would you do with MTV to make it relevant again? And then as a total random side point to it, does JoJo Sidewalk fit into that mix?
What's JoJo Sidewalk?
I don't know. My kids are super into her. She's like a rising star. I think all of you will be hearing from her soon.
How old are your kids?
I got a 6- and 3-year-old.
Okay. All right.
But
I was making sure that I wasn't too
JoJo's going to
screwed. I was
supersede. JoJo's coming up. I'm telling you. You're going to hear about JoJo.
I'll take a quick shot at it. I think so this comes in the door of CAA marketing, and we get this assignment, right? I think the first thing we're doing is we're telling you we're going to go through a renaming exercise. Much like Radio Shack, what's a radio? MTV. Who's watching television? So I think the first and foremost, we were trying to go through a rebranding exercise where we just kind of decide whether or not we continue that as our title or we lose it. I think that I don't know that there is a rebrand for MTV. I think that the best way for that to happen is not to kind of have it come back as its current brand, but is to reinvent it as a new brand with this target demographic in mind. I think I read somewhere that by 2020, 50% of the population it'll be the most diverse population that we've had as of yet. And so I think that you'd have to take that into account. The types of storytellers, is it that the Ghetto Film School is creating content for it, or Pipelines, which is an organization that started in Los Angeles that helps new artists and filmmakers kind of realize their space behind the camera. Are they taking part of it? I think we burn the building down, done, and then we just create another one. We build another one.
I was talking about a company like MTV a couple days ago, and I was just saying all of these networks they're attaching to youth culture, and it looks desperate, and they're pretty lame attempts, and they're not ingraining themselves in youth culture. And I think the first step to figuring out what youth culture is figuring out what relevancy is for MTV. And so fashion is something that's been interesting to me over the past couple of months because my girlfriend was making fun of the clothes I was wearing. As I was looking into it, it's like everything in fashion, it's just a cycle. Everyone wears the same stuff. It just takes 20 years to go through. And my dad's like, "You think those were cool? Oh, we were wearing those back in the day." And I'm like, "Oh, so I'm seeing the wheel occur." I actually think it's the same thing with content at MTV. I actually think that as much as people kind of knock my generation for, oh, like they're not going to care about brands in the next 20 years. I actually totally disagree. I think that there's a lot of root and there's a lot of meaning in an MTV kind of brand, but I think that we remember it for what it was 20 or 30 years ago. And if we do remember anything, it's Rob Dyrdek. So I would actually go back and look at some of the things you guys were doing 20 and 30 years ago and try to find a way to bring those back to light today, but also integrate youth culture, which we were talking about things moving very fast. Youth culture changes every day. So being on top of what that means at that specific moment, I think is extremely powerful. And of course there's macro trends, so you can kind of figure that out for programming, but I think there's a lot intermittently that you can do to fix those problems. I just think it's very case specific.
Great. So any other questions? There's one back there.
So I'm going to say 3 things I've observed and then ask you guys to comment. One thing you mentioned is, when kids have an Instagram and they get 200 likes, it's not enough, they take it down, right? 1. 2, Facebook launching a social network for 6 to 12-year-olds. So we want to introduce this before we're even in middle school. And then 3 is that when my 3 teenagers have their friends over, I see them all hanging out in their phones, not talking to each other, Snapchatting and sharing pictures that they're actually from God knows where. Comment.
That is exactly right. I mean, yes. You've been paying attention. If I were your college professor, you'd be passing the class. And that's the reality. That's the reality. So, I'm not sure if you want me to sort of say, well, how do we change that? And I think, I think it's about acknowledging what it looks like and what's the space you bring to that conversation. Because whether you think that, 4 people sitting at the same table and snapping and not talking to each other, there's no conversation. Well, there is a conversation. So you have to learn that conversation. And instead of trying to change it and make it something else that may be more familiar to you. And I think that's what brands have to do. We have to figure out what is not being said, but what is being said in the unspoken silence of the room, as it might appear. Getting into that is really important.
I agree. I mean, my only add, and it's hard to come after this guy. You kidding? He's incredible. But I'll get. I promise I'll make it short. It's funny when I was thinking about your question. I'll just go through a little bit of an anecdote. Like, remember when the Beatles were noise in the basement? Remember when hip hop music was garbage? Like we just have to lean into that a little bit more, and it's weird. We have to. And I'm asking and imploring all of us to kind of like get out of our comfort zone a little bit and be accepting and open to new ideas. I think that it'll make us better storytellers. It'll make us better brands. I think it'll make us better people.
So for the Facebook thing, it's genius. The fact that they're doing that. Nestle in the 90s was trying to introduce coffee to Japan. And they were trying to make coffee a replacement for tea in Japanese culture, which is obviously never going to happen. So the way that they integrated it into Japanese culture is they gave children under the age of 11 coffee-flavored candy. 5 years later, when they were looking for a coffee-flavored drink, guess what they brought in? Coffee. So what Facebook's doing is basically it's kind of setting up I call it the relationship funnel. So they're getting them in super early with things they're already interested in, like YouTube, Netflix, bringing in a service like that. So then when they have the opportunity to pick a social network, it'll flow into it. Because I think Facebook knows they already lost Gen Z. So I thought that was cool.
Facebook right there, so we might generate some. Good
just because I wasn't going to bring it up,
This
but
is good. This is juicy.
I just want to correct you a bit on what the Messenger for Kids, which is a standalone app. It's not actually a replacement for Facebook or YouTube. It's more about building a community. But the question and comment that I had was more back to the sort of connection between media consumption and creation and this generation. Because Allison, you started off the conversation talking about this generation, 70% wanting to build something, and the things that we're seeing, particularly in video and the new forms that you talked about, more embracing how that consumption of media is changing. And so new programs, for example, we have on our platform of Watch, a program called I Want My Phone Back. And that has been developed by a Gen Z generation of people who are taking the platform and deciding how they want to consume the content and more engaging in it in a way that now is possible. So it's not MTV redone. It's sort of a whole new thing that is a partly creation and partly sort of the technology that's coming together. So I'm curious as to, what are you watching, Connor? Where are you watching it on? And any points you have about media consumption, because I think that's a really important point for all brands.
So specifically for kind of age brackets, not really generation generalizing this, I think 12 to 20, it's like, I'll just kind of like, for context, go through all the social media platforms. Snapchat is the best friend that you see every day at school and you're really excited about it. Instagram is becoming more of Snapchat, but Instagram is school. It's like you go every day, but you're kind of excited to see your friends. Twitter is where you go when you're kind of bored and need something to scroll through. So it's like the friend who's kind of funny but annoys you, and then you go when they get too annoying. Facebook is the girl or guy that you call when you're kind of lonely and it's super late at night. Only for 12 to 20. Only for 12 to 20. So the way that Facebook is being consumed from 12 to 20 is just kind of like family update. Let me scroll through. Here's what I found myself getting. So I'm weird. I have a ton of like super old friends. So I go into Facebook and I'm super on that. So I find myself getting caught in this rabbit hole of seeing one Facebook video. And then I'm like, that was kind of interesting. And then an hour later, I was watching all Facebook videos. I think if Facebook wants to win with young people, they obviously need to have brands pay to play for advertising, but they need to do what people just look at Vine and are like, Vine failed. No. There was an amazing lesson from Vine. It goes, when you give people 100% organic reach, shit gets popping and stars get created, right? So if Facebook gave people pages 100% organic reach that weren't business related, then you'd start to see a ton of content getting created, influencers. But the problem is Facebook is so pay to play for advertising from public pages. So if they can find a way to implement that into the UI and things like that, boom, it's just then no one has a chance to compete.
I love what you're talking about regarding the content creators being the people who are the protagonists and the young influential people. I literally, like, as a sidebar after this, I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I'm fascinated by that. I have nothing to add by that. I think that's incredible what you just talked about. I think in terms of as it relates to entertainment, I think what's interesting is that, you know, our culture was one that kind of went out and experienced everything. I'll never forget, like, the way that I connected with my father, who's like a workaholic, was that every Saturday we would go to the movies together. And so I grew up a movie buff, and look at where I am right now, right? but it was the way I connected with my pop. It's the same way you did with food, and over culinary things, we would sit down and we would not only just see the movie, but then we would talk about the movie afterwards while I, wolf down some hot chocolate or something like that. But the content you're talking about, the way it's consumed at that time was going out and receiving that content. Now it all comes to them. And it's not even in a way that is a trickle, but a blizzard. And so how do you stand out in that sea of sameness? How do you stand out as we're all marketers and brands in the room here, and somehow cut through that it's proverbial clutter? It has to be through something that's compelling. It has to be through something that involves them and allows them, honestly, at some point to kind of like get their hands in the wet clay and participate with the brands on their terms. I think the biggest mistakes that I've seen in the last 2 decades of me being in this business are when brands force themselves on this culture, and even when it gets rebuked. And so I think we just have to participate in their lives a little bit more and allow them to participate in ours.
Outstanding panelists. Thank you so much. Great.